we go. Right, so good morning everyone, and I'm very happy to be here in Santiago de Compostela. Before I launch into my presentation, a small anecdote. When Robert contacted me to come and make this presentation, I said yes, sure, that's fine. I was then contacted by the agency organising the event. And they said, "Dear Mr. Worth, what are your travel requests to get here to Santiago de Compostela?" And I said, I want to take the train from Lisboa to Porto, Porto to Vigo, Vigo to Santiago de Compostela. And then I want to go back the same way back to Coimbra. I live in Germany normally, but it's a long story why I was in Portugal. I'll come to that in a minute. And I need to leave after 2 p.m. Yesterday from Lisbon. Dear Mr. Worth, we regret to inform you that we cannot fulfill your request to book such a journey by train, because leaving after 1400 hours from Lisboa, it's not so far from here, it's less than 500 kilometers. To get to Santiago de Compostela, it's impossible. We propose you the alternative itinerary, to fly from Lisboa to Madrid and Madrid to Santiago de Compostela. My response by email was, there is no way I am doing that. I urge you to reconsider. Now, the problem is the timetable is so lousy for the train that connects Porto with Vigo. It arrives too late in Vigo to get the last train to Santiago de Compostela. So I needed a night in a hotel last night in Vigo and took the early morning train to come here. Dear Mr. Worth, thank you for your request. We now are happy to confirm there is a hotel for you in Vigo. That's fine, but we have another problem. We don't know how to book trains in Portugal for you. Can you book your own train for yourself, and then we will reimburse you? Right? Okay, fine. And then the third problem. I took the bicycle with me on this trip. So I cycled from Santiago de Compostela railway station, and I park my bicycle outside the conference centre here. And a policeman comes straight up to me this morning and says, "You can't park your bicycle here. You can't lock your bicycle here, it's a safety risk." So I said, well, this huge white van, which is parked next to where I'm parking my bicycle, is my bicycle more a security risk than this van? You can't park your bicycle here. It's like, I'm parking my bicycle here. You have a 2013 open conference centre with hundreds of car parking spaces and not a single bicycle park. And this was part funded by the European Union. Now, how many of you in this room made a journey from wherever you come from to get here to Santiago de Compostela only using your feet, a bicycle, and public transport? I bet none of you did. Did any of you? None of you. I'm the only one that did, and I live in Berlin. Now, that, when we're talking about sustainability, is the crucial part of the problem, because we have to learn, as the way that we do our policies, you need to practice what you preach. Now, when you've got stuck in places, like last night, when the cross-border train broke down, which is 40 years old, and is diesel and runs on an electrified railway line, and you get to Vigo an hour late because everything broke, those are the situations when you start to begin to ask yourself, here is where we need some political changes. All right? Now, after the initial rant, let's move on. How did I get into all of this railway business in the first place? I've been an independent communications consultant working Europe-wide for more than a decade. And I tried to do all of my journeys by train to visit my business clients. I'm based in Berlin. I have clients in Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Switzerland, Italy. And I picked up an old report during the COVID lockdown from the European Parliament, an old former chair of the Transport Committee of the European Parliament, Michel Kramer. And he, in 2015, published a report called Missing Links, 15 places in Europe where you could improve transport cross-border by rail comparatively easily and with comparatively little money. And in 2021, I asked myself, which of those 15 projects put forward by Kramer had actually been fixed? The answer was 1. 2 kilometers of track at the border between Zeltlersberg in Bavaria and Asch in Czechia. In all of the other 14 cases, there had been no progress. So I then said to myself, well, what can I do about that? And actually, are there other places in Europe where the same problems exist? And what could I do about it to raise awareness of these problems and try to find ways and means, potentially, of being able to solve them? So I've then set about putting together this project called Cross-Border Rail. This is the French-German border station of Lauterbourg. There are actually some railway lines here, but they're mostly covered by grass. What is the problem? National railway systems in Europe work comparatively well, but once you cross a border by train, everything gets more complicated. The infrastructure, the level of service, the timetables, the ticketing are all of poorer quality on international lines. And these problems are cross-border, so the EU needs to step in to fix them. Just to give the example of Lauterbourg, there is an hourly train to Germany, but there are only 6 trains a day onwards to Strasbourg. So actually it's a French town which is better served by German trains than it is by French ones, which is a little bit peculiar. Here's another interesting, I have a drone with me, hence all of these aerial pictures. This is the Polish-German border, the Nysa River. The top of the picture we have Zgorzelec in Poland, and this side is Görlitz in Germany. There was a 2003 state treaty between Germany and Poland to electrify the entire Dresden to Wrocław railway line. What you see here, the electrification masts end in the middle of the bridge. Poland completed its electrification of its section by 2015, and Germany still hasn't begun the planning to even do its bit. So of course trains of diesel run across that bridge. And so Cross-Border Rail then was a 2022 project across all of the internal borders of the European Union that you can cross by train in one 40-day journey, and added Norway and Switzerland as well because they were easy to add. And then smaller projects in 2023 to go back to all of Germany's borders, and a follow-up project this autumn where I've been investigating mostly Slovenia and France, Spain and Portugal. And where there are no trains anymore, like you can't get to Greece by train anymore, across the border by bicycle. Can we then switch over? I've just got a quick video which explains what I learned from that project, and then I'll come to the policy recommendations. Faced with the climate crisis, we all need to fly and drive less and take the train more. But when you cross a border by train in Europe, everything gets harder than when you stay within one country. In the summer of 2022, I, Jon Worth, put all of this to the test with the Cross-Border Rail project. I crossed every internal border of the EU you can cross by train. That was 95 borders in total. I travelled more than 30,000 kilometres on the railways, and where trains do not run any longer, I took to my folding bicycle. And the rest was by bus, ferry and taxi. What did I find? In some places, rail lines have fallen into disrepair and would need to be rebuilt. But many of these are hard or expensive to fix, even if, like at Canfranc on the Spain-France border, they're in wonderful places. Solutions are easier where tracks exist, but passenger trains do not run. It would be simple to extend trains from Ormenio in Greece to Svilengrad in Bulgaria, or from Turmantas in Lithuania to Daugavpils in Latvia. The infrastructure and the trains for these services exist already. In other places, trains run, but the timetables are so bad no one can use them. I was the only passenger on a train between Mons in Belgium and Bournemouth in France, and was stuck for 3 hours at the Estonia-Latvia border at Valga because timetables are not coordinated. And there were other absurdities. Trains from Vigo in Spain to Porto in Portugal are diesel on an electrified line. Dilapidated infrastructure through Poland between Liberec in Czechia and Zittau in Germany slows trains down there. And tickets are crazy expensive when booking from Germany to Strasbourg. Above all, my message to the European Union, and especially Transport Commissioner Adina Valian, who received postcards from me during the project, is that it's great to live in a borderless Europe. But when it comes to railways, borders very much still exist, and the EU's railway policy is failing. This is not only about infrastructure, because that is okay in many places. The EU needs to make sure passenger trains operate in all of the places where they could run, that timetables are coordinated and regular, and that booking tickets is easy, and that passenger rights are guaranteed. So, in short, taking a train across a border within the European Union should be as simple as taking one within one country. Right, so... Sorry? Wait, so... what are the specific issues? So now, breaking it down in a kind of policy sense. So I mentioned these as kind of mentioned in part in the video. There are basically 4 categories of problems that I encounter at the borders that I go to. Tracks have fallen into disrepair. There are tracks, but there are no trains. Trains run, but the timetable is so bad that no one can use it. And there are information or ticketing problems that make crossing the border complicated. By the way, those people taking photos, the materials can be circulated around afterwards and are available on the cloud as well. So let's do one example from each of those categories and explain the situation. So we're at the border here, the Belgian-French border between the towns of Dinan in Belgium and Givet. There is an Interreg project there which is about cross-border healthcare. Yeah? But the problem is you can't actually cross that border very easily by train. Yeah? And because basically the town Givet, which you see here is in France, is actually much closer to Dinan than it's close to the regional centre on the French side at Charleville-Mézières. And that this bit, the red line, there is a train. Here, the yellow line off to Brussels, there is a train. And the black line is where I had to cycle because the train is missing. That's what it looks like at the end of the station in Givet. This is the old border station with the photo taken from the drone. And then you see actually most of the infrastructure is just overgrown, but is actually there in place. The tracks are rather overgrown. So these are the sorts of places where actually the full right of way for the reactivation of the railway is still in place. Many of the difficulties when you find where railways used to run, and I encounter these over and over again, are places where something got built on the route of the former railway. So that makes those very, very difficult to reactivate. So it's a very important question. If you want to have a go at a project like this, do you still have a clear right of way or not? And that's the crucial and central point. So ultimately, for all of these places I've gone to, and they make for nice photos, they are obviously the hardest ones to do, is the reactivation of a railway line that has fallen into disrepair. I probably have 4 or 5 cases that I've managed to document where this would be possible to reactivate. I've been to 170 railway borders by now in the last year and a half. Right, so let's talk about another one. Northern Finland, Northern Sweden. I had to take a lot of buses to get to northern Sweden because of late-running engineering works on the Swedish network. Haparanda to Tornio. At the moment, you can get a train to Haparanda and you can take a train onwards from Tornio, but again, there's not even a proper public transport link between the two here. And there is a bridge. There I am arriving with my bicycle to go off cycling from Haparanda. This is the bridge at the border, the railway bridge. And when you get close to it, it has a peculiarity. It has a dual gauge track because the gauge of the lines is different. It's broader in Finland than it is in Sweden. But at the moment, there are only goods trains that are running across that bridge. And indeed, even Lenin passed here in 1917 across this bridge. Now, what's the important point there? And hence also from the Slido from earlier. The reason, as I understand it, that there is progress, that should be ideally from December 2024, trains will cross the bridge and go to Haparanda, is there is a very strong political support on both sides of the border to want to reactivate the railway connection. Right? So before you even come to how to operate your trains, you need a solid political consensus on both sides of a border to say, we want to do something here and we want to repair this problem. Most of the difficulties, and this is actually a harder one to fix than some other places I've been to because of the technical complexity of that particular border and the gauges of the line, many of the places I've been to, for example, between Harmont in Flanders and Weert in the Netherlands, there it's very easy to fix. Belgium wants to fix it, but Netherlands doesn't want to fix it. So you have politicians on one side of the border that want it, and on the other side of the border that they don't. Now, essentially what you have here, and this is why it's a nice case, is you do have a political consensus that the problem needs to be fixed. Yeah? So look out for that, and it's a wonderful spot, so I can highly recommend going there by train when the trains are running in 2024, or ideally. So let's talk about another one. It was mentioned in the video. What about timetables for cross-border routes? We're at the border here between Estonia and Latvia, so at the top of the map is Tallinn, and we have Riga here at the bottom, and here's the border. It is the twin towns of Valga. It's a nice modernized station on the Estonian side, only a diesel train, but at least a nice modern one. The town itself is quite interesting, with the border going through the middle of the town, so there's some Ukrainian solidarity in the town. And then there's a train onwards to Latvia, which is a bit older. But the problem here is the timetables. There are 4 trains a day from Tallinn to Valga, with quite big gaps here in the timetable. And so imagine we're leaving in the morning, right? I want to leave in the morning from Tallinn to go onwards to Riga by train. But the difficulty is from Valga to Riga there are only 2 trains. So one goes at 5:13 in the morning and the other one is at 15:03, right? Now, so I have to take that one, all right? But look at this, 15:03, this one arrives 15:26, right? Now, if you coordinated that, right, you made that one arrive 20 minutes earlier, or this one depart 20 minutes later, you'd have a comparatively good connection. As it is instead, you have to stay in Valga from 11:23 until 15:03. Now, there is generally a problem here in all of the Baltic states of a lack of collaboration for cross-border transport. There is the same problem, that was an even worse problem at Daugavpils to Vilnius. All of the Baltic states seem to be waiting for the future high-speed railway project, Rail Baltica, and while they're waiting for Rail Baltica, nothing gets fixed in the everyday cross-border public transport, unfortunately. You could run a train from Tallinn all the way to Vilnius in 8 hours, which is the exact same time that the bus takes, and it would be more comfortable and pleasant to take, and on existing infrastructure. All right? So there are plenty of things that you can do here comparatively easily if the decision makers either side of the border would at least sit down with each other in order to manage to clear up that sort of a problem. Then let's talk about ticketing as my fourth category. I went back to all of Germany's borders again this year, particularly with the focus on cross-border ticketing in Germany's border regions. Not least because Germany has introduced this new flat rate €49 Deutschland ticket, which works on all regional public transport. So how well does that work if you want to cross the border? Not very well. Yeah? So Offenburg to Strasbourg, yeah? Deutschland ticket does not work to get you to Strasbourg. This is another absurdity. It's a diesel train that runs under an electrified line. It's as bad as Porto to Vigo. And there's a little sign in the train that says, Deutschland ticket isn't valid here. For the final 9 kilometers the train runs between Kiel, the last station on the German side, and Strasbourg on the French side. The great case is at the Netherlands-Germany border, Gronau to Enschede. It is a single-track diesel line with quite old trains, but Deutschland ticket is valid all the way to Enschede, and all of the Dutch passes you can get on an OV chip card are valid the whole way to Gronau, so it works perfectly in both directions. Another awful case is Aachen to Velkenrad. Sorry. Not only is it a knackered old train which is not disabled compatible, but if you arrive in Aachen and say, I would like to go to Belgium, they tell you that will be €8 for the 9-minute journey to get to Velkenrad, which is the first station on the Belgian side, because Deutschland ticket is not valid to Velkenrad and the Belgian passes are not valid to Aachen. Ultimately, you can actually trick it by going to the Belgian Railways ticket machine in Aachen main station and get the cross-border ticket for €4.50 if you know the trick. But you shouldn't have to know the trick, all right? So one which desperately needs to be improved. There will be a new train running here, all being well, however, in December, so at least disabled users will be able to cross the border there. Another really great one is Salzburg to Freilassing, again, where all of the passes work right across the border in both cases. So some of Germany's borders, it works really well. In others of Germany's borders, there's an enormous amount of room for improvement. Similar problems exist at plenty of other European borders, but I've got lots of stories I could tell about those, but I think I should stop. So that is my introduction of what I've discovered on cross-border rail. By now, as stated, I've been to 170 railway borders. I have taken the train in every EU country that has a railway, so 25 EU countries. So if you have a question about what does or doesn't work with railways at some European border region, if I haven't been there, I will at least have researched it, but chances are probably quite high that I will have been there or been somewhere close. So as well, you can get the materials there if you follow that link. Anyway, so that's all for my introduction, so thanks for listening.